"Dad, what do you think about going back to Korea? You can't seem to adapt here, Mom feels uncomfortable, and we have our own lives, we can't take care of you. I just wanted to live with you all. Then just send me money, why complicate things by coming here?" These were the final words a father heard after dedicating 15 years of his life entirely to his family. Sending his 2 children to Harvard and Yale while working as an executive, he transferred hundreds of thousands of won every month to cover household expenses. Yet, he was cast aside by his family under the pretext that he was no longer needed. At that moment, he felt all his sacrifices had been in vain, and he made the most important decision of his life. From then on, he would live for himself. Through his poignant story, we'll explore the 3 most crucial preparations for retirement. In a quiet cafe in Gangnam, Seoul, we met Kim Song-jun. His face bore deep wrinkles around his eyes. "I did everything to ensure my children had a better future," he began slowly, holding his coffee cup. His story dates back to 1999, 25 years ago, when he was at the peak of his career. He had overcome the IMF crisis and risen to an executive position in his company. His family was admired by many, always cheerful, spending weekends at the Han River Park or summer vacations in Gangwon. It was around this time that his wife suggested sending their children to study in the United States. When their eldest son was about to start elementary school, she brought up the possibility of an education abroad. At first, Song-jun was hesitant due to the high costs. But every night, his wife talked about the limitations of the Korean education system and the intense competition. After many discussions, he began to think it might be worth pursuing a different future for his children. In January 2002, the Song-jun family stood at Incheon Airport, which had just opened. The place was modern and gleaming, but his heart was heavy. As he bid farewell to his wife and 2 children, his youngest, with tears in his eyes, asked, "Dad, why aren't you coming with us?" Those words broke his heart. The first few months were extremely challenging for Song-jun. He woke up early to make video calls before work and spent nights checking emails. The time difference exhausted him, and he couldn't sleep well. Thankfully, his eldest son adapted quickly, learned English, and enjoyed school, but his youngest, just starting first grade, faced significant challenges. He noticed how different his classmates were, struggled with the language, and felt left out. Every night, he cried, saying he wanted to return to Korea. During these moments, Song-jun felt crushed, but his wife reminded him to endure for the children's future. Over time, the financial pressure became increasingly unbearable. At first, Song-jun thought sending 5 million won a month, a significant amount at the time, would be enough. As an executive, he could manage it. But soon, he realized the reality was far different. Housing, food, and other expenses far exceeded his expectations. Even sending 8 million won monthly often wasn't enough. His account was always empty by month's end. Still, his wife constantly mentioned money. Ji-yoon wanted to take violin lessons, and she would say, "Honey, we've spent too much on the house this month." Every time she said it, it annoyed him slightly, but when he thought about how hard it must be for her to raise their children in another country, he also felt grateful. So, he decided to work even harder. On weekends, he took on various jobs through employment agencies. His well-being was always secondary. He hadn't had breakfast in years, his lunch was a 1001 kimbap or instant ramen, and dinner was usually convenience store fast food. Exercise was out of the question. By 2005, his health began showing warning signs. Suddenly, he felt chest pressure and had trouble breathing. A trip to the emergency room revealed stress-induced angina. The doctor warned him that continuing this lifestyle could endanger his life. But he couldn't afford to rest, so he returned to work the next day. 8 years later, the news came that his eldest son, Min-soo, had been accepted to Harvard. He was so overjoyed he could barely contain himself. It was one of the happiest moments of his life. Cautiously, he suggested to his wife, "How about we return now that we've overcome this?" Her response was distant. "Ji-yoon still needs to prepare for her university entrance exams. How can we manage that? And Min-soo is just starting college life." For more years passed. By then, Ji-yoon had also been accepted to Yale to study violin. Though it had been a struggle, he had successfully sent his children to prestigious universities. Finally, he thought they could live a peaceful, happy life together. He believed it was enough and told his wife, "This is it. Now you can come back." But her response shocked him. "The kids still need us a lot. Even though they're in college, they're not fully independent. Honey, I can't do it anymore. I've lived alone for 12 years, and you know how hard and lonely it's been for me. Why don't you think about the kids? They still need me." When Song-joon recalled that conversation, his eyes filled with tears. From that moment on, something began to feel different. Video calls became less frequent, and when we spoke on the phone, she would always hang up quickly, claiming to be exhausted. Additionally, my children's requests for more money increased. In 2015, I made a life-changing decision. I retired at the age of 56. I couldn't continue living like that, and at work, as I approached my 50s, I constantly felt under scrutiny. But what I truly wanted was to be with my family. I received a substantial amount of money upon retiring and thought it was the perfect time to start a new chapter in the United States. However, reality was different. Reuniting with my family after 13 years felt distant. Only my wife came to meet me at the airport. The kids were too busy. When I arrived home, there wasn't a proper space for me, just a small room barely big enough for a bed. My wife preferred not to spend time with me and kept herself occupied with her friends. My relationship with the kids was also cold, we barely crossed paths. Whenever I tried to talk, they would respond, "Dad, why do you ask so many questions?" A month after arriving in the United States, I found Ji-yoon in her room and approached her to talk. "How's everything going at university, Ji-yoon?" I asked. She replied, "Dad, please leave me alone. Why do I bother you so much?" I asked. And she answered, "Dad, why don't you go back to Korea?" I was stunned and asked why. She said, "Because Mom feels uncomfortable, and we have our own lives. We can't keep worrying about you all the time." "I just want to be with you all," I replied. "Then, please go back to Korea. Just send us money. There's no need for you to be here doing all this." Those words hurt me deeply, and a few days later, something happened that changed everything. I overheard my wife talking with a friend. She was saying, "I'm so exhausted. I can't go shopping or meet my friends because I always have to be on alert. And now that Dad is here, what are we going to do?" At that moment, I realized how absurd my behavior had been. After 13 years of giving everything for my family, I was nothing more than a tool to earn money. I couldn't take it anymore, so I packed my things and booked a flight back to Korea. My time in the United States ended after just 1 month. When I returned to Korea, I fell into a deep depression. The number of pills I took before sleeping increased every night, and I began to fear interacting with other people. All I had left was a small apartment in a building because I had spent nearly all my money during my stay in the United States. My wife didn't know I had overheard her conversation, so she continued asking me to send her money every month. However, I no longer had any resources. All I had left was my pension, and covering loan interest became increasingly challenging. When my wife realized I had no money left, she filed for divorce, and my children stopped communicating with me. It was as if everything had been an illusion that disappeared when the money ran out. The relationship ended. After 15 years, the memories of my life as a father faded into emptiness. Song Jun's voice trembled as he spoke. It was the hardest time. At midnight, I used to walk along the Han River Bridge. I asked myself, why have I lived up to this point? How should I keep living now? That was all I could think about, and the days passed. Since I couldn't eat properly, I lost 15 kilograms. A few days later, my phone, which had been silent for a while, finally rang. It was news of my mother's death. When I saw the call, I felt a sense of weakness, as if I were crumbling. When was the last time I saw her? All I could think about was how she always worried about her children. I hadn't managed to properly cover her medical expenses, and after the funeral, I returned to my hometown. In her room, I found so many photos of me. She always told me not to focus solely on my grandchildren but also to take care of my own health. However, I couldn't tell her I had returned to Korea from the United States because I feared it would worry her. I never thought I would leave without having the chance to say goodbye one last time. While handling my mother's inheritance matters, I received unexpected news. She had left a property in the countryside, and industrial development plans were underway in the area. The property's value turned out to be much higher than I had imagined. In that moment, I realized I had to move forward with my life for her, as if it were my last chance to truly live for myself. My mother had given me the opportunity to start anew. Before continuing, remember to like the video if you're enjoying it and subscribe to the channel for the best tips on attracting abundance and prosperity into your life. Let's move forward. From that moment on, my life took a turn. With the money from selling the land, I started a new chapter. The first thing I did was get a medical checkup. "Am I seriously ill, doctor?" I asked. "Wow, you've neglected your health a lot," he replied. I had always put everything else first, skipping breakfast, eating fast food, and trying to numb loneliness with alcohol. My health was severely affected. One day, as I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My body was worn out, and my posture was hunched. I decided then to start exercising every morning. The first thing I focused on was regaining my physical well-being. At first, it was quite challenging. Waking up at 6 a.m. felt like a struggle. When I went for walks around the neighborhood, my legs would tremble, and I felt short of breath. But gradually, I started increasing the distance. Now, I walk 5 kilometers every morning without feeling tired and feel revitalized. I didn't just change my exercise routine but also my eating habits. I used to eat hastily and in a disorganized way, but I decided to start preparing healthier meals. I began learning to cook by watching YouTube tutorials. Initially, even steaming an egg was a challenge, but now my cooking skills have improved. These days, I prepare brown rice, soybean paste soup, and 3 seasonal side dishes. I even bring my own lunch to work. After 6 months, when I underwent a new medical checkup, the doctor was impressed. My cholesterol levels had returned to normal, and my blood pressure was under control. I had even gained 8 kilograms. What has truly changed is that I no longer know what it means to feel exhausted. After so many years working at the company, I trusted financial planning. First, I sought out a retirement planning specialist and scheduled a consultation. I carefully calculated costs for living expenses, healthcare, entertainment, and more. Mr. Seongjin decided to divide his money into 3 parts. He invested 40% in secure financial products with guaranteed capital, allocated 30% to diverse options, and left the remainder as additional funds. He emphasized the importance of modest but stable happiness. Previously, I only saved money, not knowing how to enjoy it. Now, I allow myself to enjoy life in an organized way. Every month, I set aside 150,000 won for cultural activities and 100,000 won for my hobbies, enjoying everything within those limits. Seongjin's face lights up when he talks about pottery. I started purely by chance after seeing a flyer at the neighborhood cultural center. Working with clay gives me a deep sense of calm. If I don't achieve what I want, I simply start over, which reminds me so much of life. I've made some very special friends in the pottery class. They are all starting new chapters in life, just like me. Each has their own story and wisdom, and there's always something new to learn. Now, every Saturday, we go on walks together. Last year, along with other students from the cultural center, we organized an exhibition. People could see the pottery I made, and some pieces were even purchased. Lately, my relationship with my children has also gradually improved. My second child came to spend some time with me. He saw the pottery I made and tasted the food I prepared, expressing his surprise. He told me how impressive it was to see how much Dad had changed. Now, we have a video call every month. We ask how we're doing and chat. We've agreed not to talk about money anymore. These days, Mr. Seongjin mentions that he looks forward to every morning. I used to fear waking up, but now everything is different. When I wake up, the first thing I do is water the plants on the balcony. Then I take a walk in the park and have breakfast. In the morning, I dedicate time to pottery, and in the afternoon, I enjoy reading at the neighborhood library. At night, I sometimes play badminton with the neighbors. He especially emphasizes the importance of enjoying the small things in everyday life. I don't wait for grand events. A cup of coffee while watching the scenery from the window in the morning, fun moments with friends in the pottery class, listening to classical music while eating a meal I cooked myself, these are the things that make me happy. It's a happiness that doesn't depend on anyone else, it's one I build for myself. Looking back, I realize I made a mistake. I believed my children and partner would be my support in retirement, but true preparation for this stage of life is something different. The 3 fundamental aspects Seongjin highlights for proper retirement preparation are as follows. First, health. When health is lost, everything else is affected. I should have paid more attention to my health when I was younger, but now that I've started taking care of myself, I can see the changes. Regular exercise, maintaining a balanced diet, getting enough sleep, and undergoing regular medical checkups are essential. Strength training, in particular, is crucial. As we age, we tend to lose muscle mass, but with proper management, we can reduce the risk of falls or fractures. Second, financial stability. Money isn't everything, but without it, life can be complicated. Planning ahead for life after retirement is essential. Saving and having pensions or income are key, especially while we're still in a good situation. Preparing for health-related expenses is vital, as medical costs tend to increase with age. Finally, hobbies. Knowing how to make the most of alone time is fundamental. If you have a hobby, you won't feel lonely. Connecting with people through shared interests makes time fly without you even noticing. That is true happiness. Especially hobbies that involve learning and creating bring satisfaction and give life a sense of purpose. Xiangjin concluded, "Now I understand that maintaining good health, being financially independent, and finding daily joy through hobbies are what truly prepare us for old age. Don't repeat the mistake I made, and always remember that the most important person in our life is ourselves." Dear family of Wisdom and Company, what do you think about Xiangjin's story that we shared today? His experience as a father for 25 years and the loneliness he faced at the end of his journey. But by rising up and finding his own happiness, his journey leaves us with much to reflect on. How are you preparing for old age? Is it money, health, hobbies, or something else? I invite you to share your stories and thoughts in the comments. Next time, I'll bring you a story that will touch your heart. If you support us with your likes and subscriptions, we promise to continue offering even better content. This was Wisdom in Company. Hello, I am the Guide of Wisdom. Today, I want to share 3 aspects that are better kept hidden, even from your children, through a story. Let's begin. First of all, avoid boasting about your wealth and money. Here is Minseek's story. Greetings, everyone. Today, I want to share an experience that left me with a deep sense of disappointment, through this channel that I follow regularly. I have dedicated my life to raising my 2 children. Thanks to my wife's sharp financial acumen, when our children got married, we were able to buy each of them a small apartment. We decided to move to Seoul, hoping to stay close to them after living apart for so long. We believed we would spend the rest of our lives together in Seoul. When my eldest son, with a very professional attitude like that of a real estate agent, asked if I wanted a large apartment, I replied that we already had more than enough, even for a spacious place in an expensive area. I explained that our prosperity came from my wife's business, which involved exchanging rural land for money, and that we had always been cautious with our spending. I also mentioned that all our wealth had been achieved through the hard work I had done throughout my life. However, my daughter-in-law's response was firm and blunt. She explained that I didn't understand how hard it had been to raise 2 young children while both she and her husband were working. She added that without her mother's help, one of them would have had to quit their job. She spoke about the tough times they had endured and said that now, finally, they could relax, and their wish was to live in peace. My daughter-in-law, who is a Korean language teacher, gave me a critical look and said, "Dad, do you realize how challenging it was to raise the kids while working? If you had been more forward-thinking when buying the apartment, maybe it would have been a good investment. But now it's worth nothing. Our neighborhood never increases in value. The problem is that the school quality here is poor. We need to move to a better area so the kids can attend good schools. My suggestion is to sell this apartment and buy 2 in a better location." My son asked me, "Dad, why has the price of land risen so much?" I explained the situation with our properties, but when I mentioned the wealth we had accumulated, both he and my daughter-in-law were surprised. At that moment, my daughter-in-law began discussing the best school districts, hinting that where they currently lived wasn't suitable for their children. I purchased 2 apartments in an excellent residential complex. Since my wife and I, now elderly, would live there, and our son and his family as well, we chose apartments of more than 40 pyang. After we made that decision, everything moved quickly. Although it was the same complex, given its size, we could have chosen apartments separated by some distance. However, we were clear that this wasn't our intention. Being experienced and in control of our decisions, we aligned both the front and back balconies for a direct connection between the units. My wife, who heard this somewhere, used to say that in England, there's an ideal distance between parents and children, a space where the soup doesn't get cold, meaning they should live close but not too close. She thought that would be best. I suggested she not insist on this, as I felt that if we lived too close, our daughter-in-law might feel obligated to bring us hot meals occasionally. Instead, I remarked that the important thing was to see their lights on from a distance. I didn't want to live too close. However, you never know what old age has in store. Additionally, if one of us passes away, we wouldn't worry about it, but knowing we're alive through the sight of their lights provides a sense of calm. Anyway, living close enough to see the lights is best for maintaining communication between busy children and older parents who don't have many activities. My son said, "Of course, Dad, Mom, when you're alone, come to our house often. Yichan and Yesel will enjoy it too." Yichan and Yesel are their elder and younger children. My daughter-in-law, who usually has a somewhat ironic tone, was also happy with the idea of living close and, with a hint of envy, mentioned that living near parents is an excellent way to show respect and filial love. She invited us to dinner with the children once or twice a month. The children are polite, healthy, and well-mannered. When I shared this at alumni gatherings, people were amazed since it's uncommon to see children dining regularly with their grandparents. They said it showed genuine family devotion. I felt somewhat satisfied with these comments, thinking that perhaps I had planned my retirement well. However, one day, my second son came to see me urgently. He said, "Mom, you bought an apartment for the eldest. Don't you think it's unfair to favor him just because he's the eldest? We're struggling with the kids and our financial situation, and you know it very well." He added, "Our business isn't doing well, we're facing many problems." I replied, "Are you talking about money when you haven't seen your mother in so long? Do you really think your business struggles are my fault?" Then my son said, "Please help us, we're going through a very tough time." Apparently, he first went to his elder brother to ask for money and shared his financial problems, suggesting he talk to us. Although our financial situation was also difficult, I couldn't stop worrying about what my son was going through. So, I decided to sell the house and buy a smaller apartment in the same building, one floor below. I considered moving to a more affordable place, but for the sake of family pride and the image we wanted to maintain before friends, I chose not to. In this way, I could assist my son in his time of need. However, after this, invitations to dinner from my eldest son became less frequent until they eventually stopped communicating with us. At first, I thought he was simply busy, but as time passed, I started to worry and decided to call him to check on how he was doing. I mentioned that it seemed his family had been running late frequently. He explained that the kids had extracurricular activities, which disrupted their schedules, and when they were exhausted, they preferred eating out rather than preparing meals at home. Although his tone was somewhat distant, I sensed that he was subtly implying he didn't want to feel watched. At those moments, I refrained from inviting my son to eat with us, as family relationships shouldn't rely on constant supervision. Over time, I realized I no longer perceived things the same way. Something as simple as the darkened window in his room made me question if it was different from the others. I felt that the unlit window reflected a faint, hesitant, and distant spark, like the flickering light of a campfire. One day, I decided to go for a walk, and discreetly, I went up to my son's building. I rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. Just as I was about to leave, I ran into a woman exiting the building across the street and, out of courtesy, asked if my son had arrived. She mentioned that he had been at our house not long ago. That left me pensive, and I didn't dare share it with my wife. As time went on, I began to notice that family dynamics had changed. My connection with my eldest son was no longer the same, and the younger one constantly sought help due to financial struggles. My wife and I realized that we had devoted everything we had to our children's well-being, yet in the end, we felt empty. What hurt me the most was my children's attitude. They no longer showed respect and seemed to take everything we had done for granted. Though late, I now understand a fundamental lesson. What our children truly need isn't money or material things, but the ability to take responsibility for their own lives. Encouraging their independence is, in reality, the most genuine expression of love. Let me share a mistake that occurred in a social setting, involving Mr. Byongo. I'm an older person, and in my youth, I dedicated myself so much to work that I didn't even notice how time flew by. Upon retiring, I suddenly found myself with a great deal of free time, leaving me with a sense of emptiness. Although I had maintained relationships with various people for many years, when I needed someone to talk to, I realized I no longer had anyone to turn to. That's when I decided to join a hiking club, hoping to fill that void. At the first meeting, I met a man, Mr. Kim, who seemed very familiar and friendly, as if he were my age. Talking to him, I realized we had more in common than I had thought. It was amazing, I hadn't connected so well with someone in ages. We even joked and laughed, as if we were back in our school days. That's how we began seeing each other often. One day, we decided to go hiking together. Upon reaching the summit, while enjoying the scenery, our conversations turned deeper. After descending, we sat in a small neighborhood cafe and shared a glass of macchiato. At that moment, as if to show him how much I trusted him, I let myself be carried away by the alcohol and began talking about my past. How naive I was, I thought as I spoke. I knew what I had done was illegal, but at the time, the need for money led me to make poor decisions. Who could listen to something like that? Only someone I trusted, like you. Kim nodded, as if he understood. But from that point on, he began to distance himself. He no longer responded to my messages and avoided seeing me. Later, when I attended a club meeting, I noticed everyone staring at me, and I overheard whispers around me, "He's that con artist." It was clear that Kim had shared my story with everyone in the club. It was a harsh blow. The feeling of being betrayed by someone I had trusted deeply broke me inside. In the end, I decided to leave the club and isolate myself once more. However, I learned a valuable lesson from all of this: what you say never remains a secret. When relationships are close, it's normal to share and open up, but when complications arise, and conflicts emerge, the person who knows all your vulnerabilities can become your worst enemy. It's okay to mention small mistakes or funny anecdotes when there's trust, but avoid discussing actions that might cause social controversy or expose your family's vulnerabilities. These aspects could be used against you. If a relationship deteriorates, the other person might exploit your weaknesses as a tool to threaten you or justify their disdain for you. On the other hand, avoid imposing your values on others. This reminds me of the story of Mrs. Kim Ji-young. Let me tell you about it. Hello, I'm Kim Ji-young, 30 years old. Recently, I visited my parents' house in the countryside with my husband. It used to be a warm and welcoming place, but now it showed signs of wear. There were small repairs pending for a long time, and the paint on the exterior walls was peeling. I suggested to my mom, "Let's paint the walls." My husband and I decided to start the task. Since we had to leave the next day, we were in a bit of a rush, but we realized we only had a small ladder. This meant we couldn't reach the higher parts of the wall. We looked at each other with worried expressions. Just then, an older man appeared carrying a long ladder. Although he must have been around 80 years old, he was tall and strong-looking. The elderly man, holding the ladder, glanced at me and remarked, "Good thing you've got the ladder now." I quickly thanked him, and he simply added, "You should have prepared it earlier," before walking away. As I watched him leave, I asked my mom, how did he know we needed a ladder? She smiled and replied, "Even though it seems like he doesn't notice anything, that man knows everything. He understands what each house needs, what's missing, everything." I was impressed, as despite his serious demeanor, there was something about him that conveyed kindness. My mom concluded, "He's a man from another time, but he's always aware of everything." The old man often boasted about his glory days, constantly reminiscing about how well things had gone for him back then. At the same time, he never missed a chance to criticize details, like the color of the neighbor's door, arguing it should be changed because it hurt property values in the area. He even suggested the lawn should be mowed more frequently. Over time, his habit of getting involved in neighborhood affairs earned him a reputation as a nosy old man. His complicated personality caused him to grow distant from many people, including his own children. Despite this, to us, he was a generous grandfather who was always willing to give us what we needed without expecting anything in return. It made me think about how the kindness and attitude of someone considered wise could be mistaken for being meddlesome. Though his intentions were the best, his words were often perceived more as criticism than constructive suggestions. When analyzing people like him, it's common to notice that they often have a very rigid worldview. From their daily habits to their political stances, they show little openness to other perspectives, building an emotional wall that blocks any form of critique. Of course, it's essential to acknowledge their achievements and appreciate the paths they've taken, but we can't assume their journey is the right one for everyone. Wise people understand that it's not appropriate to impose their preferences or points of view on others. They recognize that insisting on a single way of thinking or acting can have negative effects. Some might wonder if this means staying silent while others make mistakes. In those moments, an alternative is to offer recommendations instead of reproaches. Humans often reject criticism, especially when they feel their intellect or dignity is being questioned. In many cases, people see themselves as victims, creating imaginary grievances that reinforce strong resistance. For this reason, instead of saying, "You're wrong," we could opt for something like, "What do you think about trying it this way?" Focusing on the problem rather than the person is often much more effective than we realize. What do you think should be avoided as we grow older? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. I hope this reflection on aging has been helpful, and I assure you I'll continue sharing stories that can contribute to a brighter future. Thank you for watching this video.